Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Eerie International, episode 478 this week. My name is David from the United States.
I'm Andi from Germany.
I'm Dave from the UK.
We are reunited again to talk about a pretty different film for the podcast this week, Red Rooms from French Canada, a nation I guess, invented, sort of. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the show. We talk about horror stuff, whether it's movies, TV shows, video games, podcasts, audio narratives, plays, musicals, comic books. Whatever the medium is, if there's a horror bend to it, we will dive in and take a look. Again, welcome if this is your first time. If not, welcome back for the 478th time and counting. We've done interviews and stuff too, so there's definitely more than that. What else? We're on social media. Follow us over on Instagram. That's probably your best bet at Eerie International. If you want to send us some longer form thoughts, feel free to do so as well over at our Gmail account, eerieinternational@gmail.com. I think that's pretty much it for the intro. I weirdly feel rusty and locked in at the same time. I don't know what's going on. I did kind of shotgun the last half of my coffee earlier, so maybe it's all hitting me at once, like that Bradley Cooper movie where I believe he's limitless. I haven't seen it. I don't even know really what reference I'm making here. I think it's a pill. All right, let's keep going. Andi and Dave, I want to hear about what you guys got into this week. And Andi, kick us off. What have you been up to?
I'm sorry, you're not going to hear much.
Okay.
I don't know. What did I do this week? I don't know. Nothing horror-wise. So I don't really have anything to talk about. I should get back into watching horror movies. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. All good. No worries.
Nothing for me.
Okay, let's throw the ball over to Dave. What'd you get into?
I started watching Stranger Things.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. I got a fair way into it and then got distracted from it and haven't come back to it yet, but I think it's possibly because I'm trying to make it last as long as I can at this point, because I did the same thing I always do. I started watching it, and before I realised what had happened, I was into episode 7, and I was like, hang on, there's not too many of these left.
So you're at episode 7 now?
I think it's episode 7 I'm up to, yeah.
Okay, you're close to the end then.
Yeah, pretty close to the end. And it's I'm not going to mention anything that would spoil it for anyone that hasn't got into it yet, but what I will say is that I love that it took a huge fucking twist in terms of the nature of the Upside Down and what it is and what it serves as. And also, I was thinking about this as I was walking the dog the other day. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with something that they do with Stranger Things, and I think it's a lot more love than hate. The hate part of it comes because it's so obvious what they're doing, but the love part is it works so well as a piece of for the narrative, which is in every season they have a thing which they're doing in their personal lives, or something which is mentioned in their day-to-day life. So, for example, the first season, they set up the idea of demogorgons being named after creatures from Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And then in subsequent seasons, there's been musical motifs that have been turned into almost like homing beacons for characters. And then in the most recent series, literally like in the first episode, it's just like, this is a black hole. This has these implications for the future of science and travel. Yeah. And then it becomes the entirety of, I think I may have spoiled something there. Apologies, everybody.
No, but you like you said, it's
literally like the first thing in the
formulaic. Yeah,
sure. So there is a formulaic nature to Stranger Things, which I hate that I know this and that I recognize it, but also I love that it helps to make sense of the season and almost kind of signpost what this season is going to be airing towards. I'm so far absolutely loving season 5. I've got no notes whatsoever. It's just nothing but thumbs up all the way for me. I can't think of anything at the moment. Maybe when I finished it and I look back on it in its entirety, I'll have some notes that I want to talk about. But for the time being, I'm really enjoying it and very happy with where they've taken it. And you guys have both kind of agreed that they stuck the landing on it. So I'm just looking forward to seeing that landing for myself and seeing what they decide to land and on what runway they decide to do it on. There we go.
Especially if you're digging the season so far, I would be surprised if the finale isn't a home run for you, or let's say a hat trick. I'll switch the sport up for you.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah, make it a little bit more British.
Got that. So excellent.
Yeah. Cool. Is that it for you this week?
Yeah, it's been very, very light on horror this week.
All right, no worries. This is going to be a quick intro, guys. I don't have a ton either. I did finish that Stephen King book called Later, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I don't remember now how much I talked about it in past episodes. I know I mentioned I was reading it, but just in case I didn't, or just as a little recap refresher, it's part of the Hard Case Crime label. So it's a label, I believe, out of the UK that does both new releases and, I think, based off of what I've seen of their catalog, mostly reprints, but I could be wrong, of older crime novels and collections of short stories, stuff like that. And I have a little section of my collection that's hard case crime stuff. And Stephen King has written 3 books for the label. He did Joyland, The Colorado Kid, and Later, the one that I just read. And I have Joyland and The Colorado Kid. I haven't read those yet. As far as I know, those two don't have much horror stuff in them. I could be wrong. But Later is definitely kind of a blend. So it's crime, but definitely has horror. And there's even kind of a recurring motif in the book where the narrator, who is a kid that ranges from the ages of like 6 at the beginning of the book to, by the time it ends, like 13. There's a little bit where he's kind of older, reflecting back, but for the most part, it's in that range. And there's even kind of a recurring motif where he says, this is actually a horror story. This is a scary story, whatever. So the basic sort of premise of the book, that's kind of a Sixth Sense sort of deal where he can see dead people. It's the rules are a little bit more specific in that it usually happens when someone dies, they kind of hang around either exactly where they died or places that had some sort of significance for them. And they're there for not long. I don't remember if it ever actually specifies. I want to say days to weeks at most before they kind of and they start to kind of fade away and then they're gone. So he's able to see them in that period of time. And so his mom is a literary agent. She has a sort of on and off again girlfriend who's a New York City cop, and you quickly sort of piece together and realize early on in the book, so this is, I guess, a minor spoiler, but it sort of sets up the entire, plot, is that her mom's on and off girlfriend is a dirty cop and has gotten into some shady shit. So there's, from there, it turns into this sort of kind of coming of age story, kind of a fantasy horror sort of thing, but definitely the crime comes back in where he's getting pulled into situations by the adults around him that either believe in the fact that he has this ability or believe enough that something's going on to try to use it to their own gain. It goes from there. I will say, for the Stephen King shared universe enthusiasts, of which I know there's at least one on this podcast, so shout out to Dave Roberts. There's a pretty specific connection to it. I won't spoil too much, but the way that this character Jamie, the narrator of the book, he doesn't have any knowledge of the stuff that went down in Derry and with Pennywise. There's no direct references to that book like there are in some other King books. There is one particular name that Jamie describes one of the entities that he's interacting with as, that is recurring in the book, and it's the same sort of description that they use for a version of Pennywise. There's I don't know enough about King's shared stuff to know if Is The Shining, is that like a thing? Not the book, but like the ability. Is that kind of a catch-all for supernatural stuff, or is it a very specific sort of power? Like, I don't know. Maybe Jamie has The Shining. I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
I feel like it's probably something which is referred to in the in the Dark Tower books. You've got these characters called Breakers who have these psychic abilities, and it's being harnessed to some nefarious end by the big bad. But they're never specific enough or referenced to it in the same way as it's referred to in The Shining. So I think it's probably the same power, and it's just that it's telekinesis, right? Like it's kind of telekinesis and some kind of latent psychic ability and ESP, and all kind of bundled into one. Some people can do some things, some people can do others, but certainly in the Dark Tower, they can talk to each other through their minds. They can set up these little mind palaces.
So, like, I haven't read Firestarter, but is, like, the girl in Firestarter, does she have a version of that too? Does Carrie have a version of that too? Like, is it all kind of, some people would call it The Shining?
So sure about, because again, I think that the Dark Tower and The Shining, it's very much more a kind of psychic, communicative, divination kind of thing, whereas Firestarter is much more. I mean, I've heard the term pyrokinetic once, so I'm going to use that because I think that's the appropriate one. But that feels like it's a specific version of it. It would be kind of like comparing Jean Grey and Professor X. They're both psychics, but they do kind of very different things with their powers.
Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure then with the character in later. He might be just a different, because he doesn't really have any specific abilities. Like, he can't like actively do something. He can see these dead people. He can talk to them and stuff, and they can see him and talk to him, and other people around him can't see it. So in that sense, it's an ability, but there's not like a power, so to speak. So yeah, maybe it falls into a different realm. I don't know. And also maybe Stephen King has not like nailed it down too specifically. The only reason I even thought about it is because I haven't read Doctor Sleep, but I've seen the movie, and I know at least in the movie it's more delved into as like this thing that some people can do, and it's more specific, and like there's the Rebecca Ferguson's crew that has, or I think she has kind of an ability, and then the little girl in the movie, obviously she's got a version of it. So that's the only reason that made me think about it. But yeah, it's good. I liked it overall. The book, I definitely recommend it. I want to read the rest of his crime books. I won't spoil it, but there's my best friend Brandy, I've talked about her on the show before. She's nearing now the end of Stephen King's bibliography. She's read, I think, I don't know exactly how many she has left, but it's not many. And so, yeah, it's crazy. And then there's some of them she's read, like I think she's read all of the Dark Tower twice. A lot of them are audiobooks, so she's able to churn through them a lot faster because she's got commutes and stuff like that. But yeah, she's just been crushing it over years. So I was talking, she's re-listened to it because we have like kind of a little mini book club going, and we'll probably go into the next Stephen King crime books after this one. But she had already read later, and so she re-listened to it, and I sent her a voice message about it. I was like, did I miss something here? There's a revelation, like, for a subplot. Like, it's not even a main part of the story. But there's the sort of thing that they kind of hint at it a couple times of, I mean, I can say it. I'm not going to spoil what the reveal is, but like who Jamie's dad is, because he doesn't have a dad in the picture. His mom is a single mom. And so, he's asked her about it. She's been kind of cagey. And so it's touched on here and there, but like not in a big way. And after the whole like plot of the book is finished, like everything is done with like the main story beat. There's like probably 10, 15 more pages that serve as like kind of a little epilogue where it talks about him and like his life and how he's dealing with his ability and all this kind of stuff. But then there's a reveal on who his dad is, and it is wildly out of left field to the point where I was like, did this get set up? Is like there a bigger thematic thing here? Is there a metaphor I missed? Like what happened? It's not quite on the level of the sewer children orgy scene from It, but it's in a similar vein where you're just kind of like, what the fuck happened this week, Steven? That made you put this in the book? So I don't know. That was the one thing where I was like, I don't understand this aspect of it at all and why he made this choice. But it didn't detract from the book as a whole. It was just kind of like a weird footnote at the end. And but yeah, overall I liked it. There were little things here and there. Like I feel like I haven't read a ton of Stephen King books, but I feel like one thing has been consistent. Sometimes when he writes kids and how they talk and like slang and stuff like that, there's either part of me that is just underestimating how meticulously he researched and how specific he was in honing in on eras and very particular regions. And maybe it's slang words I haven't heard of. It's either that or it's that he just doesn't know how kids talk. Because there's times in the book where I'm just like, nobody talks like this, man.
It's
like
probably the latter.
I'm gonna guess it's that, especially the older he gets. And
we love you,
everything
Stephen,
else. But I was gonna say it's weirdly also like kind of endearing and like sort of cute that you could tell like he's just like trying to snap into the head of a teenager and like how they might talk and stuff. So. It doesn't detract at all. And again, like I said, it's almost kind of a weird, like sweet positive or whatever to it. But every once in a while there would be a turn of phrase or a delivery where I was just like, all right, this is this is not very realistic, but it's fine. But yeah, I dug it. Great cover too. I'm a big fan of the artist, Paul Mann. I have a big, Drive movie poster print that he did, framed. Actually, I don't think it's hanging in my house anymore. I think I replaced it with a Hellboy print, but I had one in there forever. And then I've got a few other of his prints, but he's an amazing painter. I love his work. It's not quite the same style as Drew Struzan. It's a little bit more stylized, but it's kind of in that same ballpark. And he did the cover. He might have done the covers for all three of them, but he at least did the one for later. And yeah, their whole trade dress for Hard Case Crime is great. So, recommend it. I liked it. And then I watched a couple of movies I'll quickly mention. One of them's a documentary and very real. I'll mention it just briefly because it was a good documentary. It's called Predators, and it is about specifically the TV show that Dateline NBC did called To Catch a Predator, which you guys might be familiar with. It was super popular here, I would imagine. Either variations or maybe just the show itself made it overseas too, in like the early mid 2000s. And it's this like sting operation kind of thing that Chris Hansen did about catching child predators online and luring them to a house and documenting it. And it was very popular in America. I remember my mom used to watch it all the time. I've like at times over the years as I've been lettering have gotten pulled into YouTube playlists of different episodes and stuff, and I've always had this like weird fascination with weird. I shouldn't use that word in the context of the show. Like it's a thing that at the time was definitely viewed as like this is an amazing, great thing that they're doing. They're catching all of these child predators and they're busting them, and then there's obviously the like reality TV sort of thrill of seeing these people be humiliated and publicly shamed and everything else. As I've gotten older, there's always been part of me that's like, and also you would read about things about the show. There was one very infamous situation where they kind of broke protocol and followed somebody to their house. And then that guy ended up killing himself. And so he was like a congressman or a mayor. I forget. He was involved in politics in some way. So they've gotten into trouble at different points for how they've handled situations. They're like working in tandem, usually with the cops or with these like they call them online like watchdog groups. But it's always kind of murky where it's like Chris Hansen's not a cop, and like what's the legality of this? Like so many of the cases and the situations have gotten thrown out in court because judges are like, we can't convict based off of how this was done. Like it's always been this like very weird, complicated sort of mess. And then as it's ended in its official capacities, Chris Hansen has gone on to do like his own network online thing, streaming sort of thing, and like YouTube channels. And they've basically just continued to do this show, but rebranded it in a different way. They don't have, affiliation with NBC anymore. And then on top of that, there have been all of these like copycat groups that you can see on YouTube, and maybe you guys have come across them before. I don't know, but like it's people that are even less professional, if that's the word you want to use, and how they're handling it. It's just amateur sort of stuff and like harassing people or trying to mimic to catch a predator. And anyway, it's been this whole sort of, and it's a tough thing to talk about too, because you don't want to come across like you're saying like, you know, well, there shouldn't be like, you don't want to have sympathy necessarily in some ways for child predators, but then there are also like situations where it's like, well, this situation isn't exactly like this one, and like the legalities or the morality of this is a little bit murky. Like there's also never really been a focus on figuring out why this is happening, or like why these people are making these decisions, what like help they need to get. So it's a very complex thing. So all of that to say, that's exactly what this documentary is about. So it kind of goes through all of these things, examining the show at the time, how it impacted people, the different like decoys that they use. So there are different people that were basically paid actors who looked a lot younger than they were to pretend to be the decoy at the house when the predator guys show up at first, before Chris Hansen swoops in and like turns the tables on them. How they've been impacted by it, but then it goes a level deeper and is talking about, again, like the legalities of everything. And then you start to get a little bit more of like a personal connection with the filmmaker, the documentary filmmaker of this movie called Predators, and his connection to it, and the online copycat stuff. So anyway, it was really good. It was really heavy. Obviously, you don't obviously like see anything graphic, but like the subject matter is tough, and having to try to wade through like what's the best case scenario here? Like, was this a net positive? Like, there's also a guy throughout it that's I think he's a socioeconomic sort of analyst guy, and he's talking about like the impact of public shaming, which now we have a lot more of a knowledge and handle out there. John Ronson wrote a book about it, like, and how that stuff works with the widespread sort of advent of the internet and how that's changed things. So really good, not horror in the sense of like the rest of the stuff we talk about, but I wanted to mention it just because it was a really well made documentary, but also one of those ones that's just kind of like, shit, there's just a lot here. It's really dense and sort of heavy, but especially if you're familiar with the show, I think it's worth checking out, because it's not a documentary that's just like, let's look at the impact of how the show had on the country or the world. It's more, it digs a lot deeper, and I remember having conversations with people in the past about the show and being like, man, there's aspects of this that just don't sit well with me and how they've handled things. But again, it's always one of those tough things, because you don't want to sound like you're being, sympathetic toward child predators, but just in the way it was handled. And there's a kind of a big thesis question running throughout the entire piece, which is just like, was this a like, true crime sort of like effort by the police that we then viewed as entertainment, or was it entertainment first that then was tried to be co-opted into this thing that was helping people? And yeah, so it was good, but again, pretty dense. I think it's on, I rented it, I think, but I think it's on like Paramount's network or something. I forget where it's at, but it's streaming online now. And then later that week, I was just looking for something random to watch one night and was going through kind of all the horror movies I had, gotten on iTunes recently over the past year or so. And there was one that I had started watching back when it came out, and I think it was during one of the years that I was suffering from crippling depression and made it like, in fact, when I started playing it, it went to like 27 minutes in. So I must have watched about that much and then it stopped and didn't get back to it. But the film Immaculate, so it's from 2024, starring Sydney Sweeney. This was kind of a deep impact Armageddon situation, where this movie came out, as did The First Omen. So we had these like dueling nunsploitation sort of horror, Catholic horror, religious horror movies.
Nunsploitation.
And this was, they were both pretty well received from what I remember. Immaculate, I remember seeing trailers for it at the time, and it looked kind of like, this looks like a lot of other movies we've seen come and go, and it will, probably have a lukewarm response, and, hardcore horror fanatics won't be super into it, and then, general public people won't really click with it either, and it will be the kind of movie that if video stores still existed, we would have 1 million copies of it. It felt like that kind of thing. But then when it came out, as with First Omen, my memory at least is that both of them were pretty well received, and especially with horror fans saying like, "Oh, this movie does a lot more than I expected it to." I fell somewhere in the middle. It's Sydney Sweeney plays an American who goes to Italy to join this convent, and she's got like kind of a little bit of trauma in her past, and there's clearly from the jump there's like an cold open sort of prologue scene where this girl is trying to escape the convent, and there's these like hooded figures going after her and everything, and this is the opening 5 minutes, so I'm going to spoil it, and they end up burying her alive. That's how the movie starts, so you know something's fucked up. And so while she's there, weird shit's going on and people are creepy, all that jazz. And then eventually she becomes pregnant, but she's never had sex. Definitely hasn't since since she's been there, and has this baby growing inside of her. They all view it as, hence the title, this like immaculate conception. Maybe she's got Jesus growing in her belly, the second coming, Antichrist, whatever. And then it goes from there. And I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought she did a fine job. Like she's in the news right now for a lot of stuff. So it was a little weird watching it, knowing all that. But I thought she was good. I thought the vibe, the atmosphere of the movie was good. It definitely, the third act, they break it into like trimesters, kind of the way they structure the movie. And the third trimester, it gets a lot more violent and crazy and intense than I expected. I knew some people saying that the movie, I had read before, the movie kind of goes for it, and in that moment. But looking through Letterboxd, at least, like my score was lower than most people's, not like way lower, but I think for me it was like, even with that ending being what it was, I was like, yeah, it's good, kind of a. It was fine. It was a fun way. I think it's about 90 minutes, so it checks that box for you, Dave. Okay. Yeah, I liked it fine. I don't think, have either of you guys seen it?
No,
I have not.
Okay. So I probably, if I had to guess based off of what I remember seeing of trailers and response and everything else, we'll probably end up being into the First Omen more, which is kind of a surprise because I've never cared a ton about those movies. Even the original one, which I liked and we talked about on the show, I remember more fondly for specific moments than I do of it kind of as a whole. I think part of it too is just like, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, religious horror just always skews Catholic and always is a Catholic game, which is fine. And obviously The Exorcist had a big, I think, role in that. But it's hard for it to not feel a little warmed over. I think just we've seen the imagery, and if I see an upside down cross, I get it. Like we've done this before, so I think part of it is that, where it's just kind of a shrug for me at this point, which is why at times in the past on the show too, I've gotten excited about different religious horror movies we've done when they've been outside of that, whether it's been like Judaism or I'm gonna not remember the specific religions, but I know we've done some that have been like African religious characters, demons, deities, whatever. It's easier for me to click into something like that because it feels a little bit more fresh. So that may have played a part, but at the very least, looks good. I thought well acted, and yeah, it gets pretty violent toward the end, and that was all fun. So not the worst way I could have spent 90 minutes. And then I think that's pretty much it for me this week. Other than that, I've just been working a lot. And in fact, today I'm at my friend's house recording this. I'll be headed back after the recording to work more. So it's been a little nonstop in that regard. So yeah, unless anybody else has any other stuff, we can move into our movie of the week. It feels crazy. It's only 20-ish minutes in, and we're already talking about
it. Let's fucking go.
All right, cool. All right. So we are talking about Red Rooms this week from 2023. I'll just read it straight here from Wikipedia. Canadian crime drama written and directed by Pascal Pante. I don't know how to say his name. It might be more French than that. It does not have a little brief synopsis on Wikipedia, which I did not realize until right this second. But a very, I guess, like sort of quick overview breakdown would be, we start off with this court case, that there's been this guy that's been arrested and he's being charged for these crimes, specifically the like abduction, sort of like sexual assault crimes and torture, murder of these 3 young girls at different ages, ranging from like 13 to 16, I think. And we start off basically right there in the courtroom. So this government building, and this kind of little small room. So it's not like it feels very modern and pretty similar to the U.S. in terms of the past few times I've been in like a courtroom situation. This isn't My Cousin Vinny with a big elaborate courtroom, from what I remember of that movie anyway. But very sort of sterile office kind of thing, and we are getting all of the details of the case in a very sort of like slow, methodical way of how they were abducted, they were tortured. There is a connection to the dark web, and specifically these red rooms where people can pay to access to like view live streams of these tortures and murders and everything else. And we see it from the perspective of what's her name now? Marie Kelly or Marie
Kellyanne.
Kellyanne. This fashion model who is very like well versed in technology and computer stuff and just good with numbers. She's very smart, and she's been following this court case and or has been following this case and is now showing up every day to witness the stuff at the courtroom as well. So we're getting sort of this like, play by play of what happened and what went down. And then in between those moments in the courtroom, we are seeing, what she's getting up to in terms of her own sort of like personal investigation and connection to the case. We're trying to figure out throughout the film, what is her connection to the case? Is she connected to one of the victims in some way? Is there a deeper thing here? Like, what exactly is going on? We get that contrasted with another character named Clementine, who's another sort of like true crime connected fan in a way, but in her case, very specifically obsessed with the killer. Chevalier was his name, or at least that's how I'm going to pronounce it. And kind of like a groupie sort of deal with her. And the movie unfolds from there, and we get different reveals and pieces along the way. And that's kind of the basic overview. Obviously, we'll get into more specifics and spoilers and all that jazz. But from the top, let's kick it off with just our overall thoughts on the film. Andi, what did you think of Red Rooms?
Before I get into my opinion of the movie, I would like to ask you guys something. Have you noticed that there's an illustrator listed in the credits?
I did
You
not.
don't need to look it up right now.
I had no idea.
It's our friend Jake Dion, who we had on the
Is
podcast,
it?
which I was also not aware of before watching the
Holy
movie.
shit.
But when the end credits were on the screen, I noticed illustrateur Jake Dion.
Holy
So
shit.
yeah, if I had known that before, we could have reached out to him and asked him questions. I don't even know what in what capacity the illustrator worked on the movie. I didn't even.
That's
don't
crazy.
Exactly remember if there were illustrations in the movie that he might have drawn, or if it was like, I don't know, like production drawings or whatever. I don't know. But he's listed in the credits. I tried to research it with his name and the title of the movie, or on his website. I couldn't really find anything in what capacity he actually worked on the movie. But yeah, so we know someone who worked on this movie.
That's awesome. I read
And
his
then, to be
review
honest-
for the movie last night on Letterboxd. Not
Which
knowing.
is very weird. I did read it too. I did not understand it, but yeah.
I didn't either, but I could tell you liked it.
And to be honest, until I watched the movie today, I thought it was a movie from France. I think even in
I did too.
our chat group, I
Yeah.
texted you that, Red Rooms, France 2023, and then only today I realized, oh, this is from Quebec, from French Canada. But I had seen the trailers, like, I don't know, when it came out a couple of years ago at Fantasy Film Fest several times, and for some reason I thought it's French, so this is probably in France. It isn't. So yeah, I liked the movie a lot. I was very impressed. I didn't know a lot about the movie except for having seen the trailer a few times, and I came away from watching the trailer with okay, we're watching, thinking that she's one of those groupies, as they call them in the movie, at least in the German dub, as just like Clem is, or Clementine, however the pronunciation in French is. Definitely not Clementine. And watching the movie, at some point I realized I don't actually know where Kellyanne is standing. We know nothing about her regarding the trial, regarding the killings, the killer. Is she in any way connected to someone? Is she actually one of those groupies? Is she rooting for him? But she is close to Clem, so we kind of assume that they are on the same side. And at some point, at least I realized, no, I can't really say that because I don't know. I know she's a model. I know she plays poker. I know she's savvy with a computer. And she goes to this trial every day. But regarding any emotions towards the killer or towards the victims or anything, we don't know. And then I started theorizing, where could she stand, or what is this actually about? Because I don't think this is necessarily about the conviction of this killer. There might be something else going on regarding Kellyanne, and it unfolds slowly to its conclusion. And I thought it was very well told. It's very precise in its filmmaking and the camera work. It starts out with this very long one take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, I hope they didn't. This didn't take too many takes. I hope they caught it on the first take, because this seems brutal for how long it's going on. But it seems very precise, very intentional. Slow-moving camera, slow zooms, long lenses shooting through the whole room towards one face in the crowd, and things like that, like these stylistic visual choices that I very much enjoyed. And also the music, which I thought was great, which was very on point, evoking the emotion that was fitting for each moment when it was used, sometimes very precisely, especially towards the end. There's this one piece where you hear the screams of victims, or at least sounds like that, woven into this musical piece. And then the conclusion I absolutely liked. So I was absolutely positively impressed. Can you be negatively impressed? English is not my first language.
I think you can.
I'm no, I really like this movie. I think this movie. I don't know how many people have seen this movie. So looking at my letterbox, I noticed that I don't follow a ton of people, but a lot of people that I do follow have logged this movie. So maybe it is not underseen, or at least not in the US. Maybe, I don't know. But I think this movie could definitely have more eyes on it. I liked it a lot, and I'm curious where this filmmaker will go next. It seems like they have made a few movies, but I didn't look into those movies too much, but it didn't seem like they were all in that genre, or in the thriller horror genre or something. But I don't know. Anyway, if they never make a movie again, Red Rooms is still definitely worth watching. I liked it. Who else?
Dave, you go next.
Cool. I might have an answer for you, Andy, regarding what Jake's involvement was in far as what he contributed. And I don't know this for sure, but I'm basing this off of an interview that I read because, unusually for me, I did my fucking research this week. And by research, I looked up a couple of interviews with the director because I didn't know what the fuck was going on in this movie, and I wanted it explained to me. For I am an idiot savant. I know, I'm just an idiot. So they mention in an interview with him on ScreenAnarchy.com with Kyle Logan, he asks about the use of animatics in the planning of the movie. And apparently there was quite a lot of animatics that were used in planning the movie, especially the opening scenes. And the question was regarding how do you plan around animatics when it's involving screens that are also on the screen, and they're doing something different, and it was pretty fucking complicated stuff. But they were really going into kind of like the filmmaking craft rather than the reasons for showing things at certain times and whatnot. So it might be that Jake was involved perhaps in some of putting together some of the animatics, perhaps. I don't know. There didn't seem to be that much on screen. Maybe some visual design for the poker sites or for the layout of some of the websites that she uses, because again, they did point out in one of the 2 interviews that I read that it all had to be designed, and this was Pascal Pante that said this. He wanted the poker in the climactic scene of the movie, which is about someone playing poker and bidding on a movie. Which is probably a little bit reductive, but basically that's what it is, and I applaud them for making that a climactic scene in a movie.
No, well, to interject very quickly, just because it's very specifically relevant to that, we all love Patrick H. Willems on this podcast, and that was his review on Letterboxd was, and I'll quote it: "It does feel weird to catch yourself in the middle of a very tense scene thinking, quote, man, I really hope she wins this online poker game and gets enough Bitcoin to ... buy that snuff film."
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny.
So the interview, I'm trying to catch my train of thought again here. Yes, so Pascal Pante says he wanted the layout of not only the poker room but also like all of the other stuff that she does online to look easy enough for people that didn't know what they were looking at to be able to follow it, because there was a whole load of hacking movies that he referenced where he was like, it's just a bunch of information with underlining to the points that you need to see, and it doesn't really make sense to anybody in particular. He wanted it to make sense, but also like for people that play online poker, he wanted the poker scene to be like, that's not baby's first poker. That doesn't look like it's been dumbed down. But his mother would be able to understand what was going on in that final scene. So, you know, that could be something as well that perhaps Jake was involved with. Jake, let us know, mate. Like, write in,
I'll
let us know. Yeah, we need to know. But the movie itself, like, I really enjoyed it. I've made no bones about the fact that for some strange reason, I really love a John Grisham. I plant any kind of courtroom drama I'm down for, and I don't know why. I can't quite figure it out in my head. I think it's just intelligent people outwitting each other and being impossibly attractive while doing it, because most of these things have got like Tom Cruise or another impossibly young and attractive, they once were, person in the roles. So it starts off with that, and I'm like, oh shit, this was made for me. And then kind of it goes off and does its own thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's not a courtroom drama then. And so you're thrust into the life of Kellyanne and what she does in her day-to-day life. And I'm completely with you, Andy, with the feeling of not really knowing where she was coming from or what her involvement was. And in my own head, I started theorizing, and I was like, maybe she's a victim that got away, or one of these kind of things. Like maybe because I noticed at the beginning of the film, there was a very pointed a very pointed remark made by, I think, the defense attorney that said basically the Crown, which is the DA for our American friends that might not know how different court systems are set out. Technically, Canada being part of the Commonwealth, it's still the Crown Prosecution Service, because the King now and the Queen before were the head of state, even though it's technically a republic country, Canada now. So anyway, the defense was saying like the prosecution have no eyewitnesses. They have no one that can point to the accused and say that is the person, that's the one that did it, he did it. And I wondered, like, the way that the camera then kind of like went over to her again, I was thinking, maybe you're that witness and you didn't have the confidence to come forward. But then the movie carries on and it gets a bit more clouded, and it never really comes to any, I say proper conclusion. Traditional conclusion is what I will say, because again, there is many things that I read in these articles and these interviews that I will be referencing later, but I'm trying to give my pure opinion of how I felt coming away from the movie. I like the fact that it didn't give us all of the answers on a plate. It left her in a very strange grey area where she did illegal things to be able to point the finger correctly at him and say he is guilty. And essentially it was her evidence that she managed to secure that got him to change his plea to guilty and got a conviction. On the flip side, she dressed up as a dead girl and sat on her bed and took a selfie. And that doesn't feel like the actions of a vigilante or an out-and-out good guy who is willing to do illegal things because the ends justify the means. Also, like, there's the scene after she's watched the Camille snuff movie and she's sitting there relaxed with a bottle of wine in hand. And I'm like, you're a cigarette away from making this look like you just got your rocks off watching this. And I was worried whenever I saw her face watching those films, I was going to see something in there that made it look like she was enjoying it. And I wondered if I saw a glimmer of that with the Camille video. Because it's difficult with the other two videos, she's already seen them, so she's dead to them. Emotionally, she's already removed from them when she was showing them to Clementine. So yeah, it's a really well-made movie. The other thing that I'll throw out, just as a thought, and then we'll get to David's thoughts. I like how the movie starts off with her bathed in blue light, and then by the end of the movie, she's washed in red. And I don't know, because nothing in the interviews that I read mentioned that in terms of like color design or cinematography. But I wonder if that's almost meant to show her kind of fall into depravity, because she starts the movie very, very emotionless, very balanced, very still. And then there's a line halfway through the film where she's explaining to Clementine how she wins, or Clementine, or Clementine, however you want to pronounce it, depends whether you're French or not, I guess. She explains how she wins at poker, and she says, people get overly emotional, and I enjoy sucking them dry, basically. And then by the end of the movie, she looks like she is getting quite emotional. Like, she's getting very excited and nothing like we've seen her in previous times where she's been winning a hand of poker. Like, suddenly she's getting something emotional from this. And then the escape with the red light, it kind of feels like she's almost like fallen from grace, but at the same time, there's something that has changed in her, like her emotions have almost been woken up by something. And I hate to think it, but the only thing that really I can put in the way of that is she watched that Clementine video, and not Clementine, Camille video, and that's at the point where suddenly we see all of this emotion out of her. So I think she's a psychopath. It's just she's a different kind of psychopath, maybe a sociopath. I don't know, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. I thought it was engaging from the off, told an interesting story, and a lot of the other thoughts I'm going to bring to the discussion are not going to be mine. They're going to be things that were brought up in the interviews that I read afterwards. So I'm going to leave those alone for now. But David, in between me and Andy, perhaps? I don't know, because I feel like there's not much room to squeeze between us.
I'll always try to squeeze in between you guys.
Hell yeah.
I liked it as well. It was one of those weird sort of viewing experiences in that I had never seen a trailer for this. I had seen people talk about it. I had a vague understanding of what it was about, or at least connected to. The late Ed Piskor, the comic he was working on before he died was called Red Room, and I'd only read the first issue of it, and it was the thing I've liked the least of all the stuff I've read of his. But I at least got an idea of what the concept of red rooms were and all that. And we've seen that explored in other horror films before at times too. I would imagine a less degree, and from what I remember of Ed Piskor's comic, it was very stylized and everything else. So this is obviously taking I assume, more grounded approach to this concept, which I haven't done research, but I assume is a real thing, or there's been, documented cases of it being a real thing. And so that was pretty much all I knew, was that it had something to do with that. I also thought it was French until the movie started playing. I also thought, I think going into it, because I'd seen some people say, I believe Elio included, but he wasn't the only person I saw say this, that it was like kind of in some ways a subversion or a riff on French new extremism, which we've talked about a lot on the show in the past. I'm a big fan of a lot of those movies. I know Andi as well. And that era that they were coming out, and as a sort of movement and a style and everything else. But I heard that this was, I heard that phrase thrown around in conjunction with this, but also again as kind of a subversion of that, because you never see, for the most part, I think the most violent thing you see is like the aftermath of a room at one point where there's just blood everywhere. But other than that, and some photos of remains, and even that, it's pretty minimal.
Jawline,
yeah. It's not too gruesome. It's obviously a dark movie, and goes into some pretty uncomfortable dark places, but not in a traditional horror thing. So that's why I said at the top of the episode too, like it's I wouldn't call it a horror movie, but it also makes sense to talk about on the show. Like, it's definitely a crime drama, I think, more than anything. Like, maybe some psychological thriller stuff going on in it as well. And I had a similar thing. I watched it with my friend Sean last night, who I've watched tons of horror movies with, and I bring him up on the show all the time, because usually if I'm watching a movie with somebody else, it's Sean. And as the movie, maybe 10, 15 minutes into the movie, where we're still in the courtroom and it's very slow, and I got a lot of Finchery vibes off of it, in terms of like it's sort of kind of cold, clinical. Why do you laugh?
It's something that the director mentions in one of the interviews. I'll bring it up later.
Okay. And it has that sort of detached kind of, matter of fact sort of vibe to it. And the protagonist, to me at least, and maybe this is just because I'm a big fan of, I've only read the first two books, seen the Fincher movie, and I've seen the first two Swedish movies, but she reminded me a lot of Lisbeth Salander from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in terms of kind of her demeanor and obviously like her tech skills and everything else. So yeah, maybe 15, 20 minutes of the movie, we paused it for whatever reason, and I was like, I always forget. I said a very similar thing that you did, Dave, where I was like, I always forget until I'm actively watching one, but how much I fucking love a courtroom drama. Even though I could tell, like, okay, this isn't going to be a horror movie, in the traditional sense, but also like I'm pulled in. It's slow, it's cold, it's dry, but I'm still engaged and interested in everything else. So anyway, I say all that to say, like, it's a movie that I'll need to watch again, probably to have a like proper sort of dialed in on the same wavelength sort of reaction to, but going into it almost completely blind, I think at different times had me kind of switching up how I felt about it, because I thought it was going to be this thing and then it was this other thing, then I thought that this character was going to be this thing and then it was this other thing. So it was constantly sort of changing, not in a crazy like twisty turny reveal sort of way, but more just me thinking that I had the movie sort of figured out as what it was going to be, and then that kind of, twisting and turning at different points. So by the end of it, I felt like I had grasped everything for the most part that I had gone down. But it was also like my opinion of it was kind of in flux, to where I was like, I don't really have any negative things about it. Like there wasn't anything I disliked necessarily. I just feel like I now need to rewatch it and be like, okay, I know what they're doing. I know what this movie is. It'll help me appreciate more sort of watching some of the performances and knowing that, cause yeah, I mean, Plant holds his cards pretty close to his chest. So you're not going to get like a major big reveal sort of monologue from, I cannot remember this girl's name. Kellyanne, is that what it was? Yeah. You're not going to get a big monologue from her like you would in other movies, where she's sort of explaining like, oh, I have, because at one point during the movie I was like, okay, is she like, and immediately I realized that this wasn't going to be the case, because she's so involved, or the mom of Camille is so involved in the situation. But if she wasn't, you could almost be like, is she like the older sister of one of the victims, and like she's trying to do some vigilante shit to get ahead of the police because she's able to access stuff illegally that, you know, they're not able to. And there's times where obviously she's not an older sister, but like there are times where that vigilante sort of idea feels pretty true. But then, then there are moments like her in the bedroom taking selfies and stuff, or her dressing up in the courtroom, where you're just like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? What is she doing? Like, what? I don't understand this. So those moments, I think, on top of not knowing the kind of movie it was going to be, you know, confounded me even more, to the point where it was like, okay, I feel like in some ways I still haven't watched it. Like now I kind of will be able to dial in. At the same time, I think maybe I wasn't as like blown away as most people seem to be by it, but not for any reasons that I was like, oh, I thought this was mishandled or this wasn't good or whatever else. I think it was just my particular. I was also very tired. I mean, we bring up this stuff every once in a while, but I think it definitely does play a role sometimes. Like I was running on a very small amount of sleep earlier that day when I was working. I dozed off at my desk. Like I was beat. So that may have also been a factor, because the movie is not. You know, the most intense scene you have in the movie is watching a girl play online poker for Bitcoin. So it's not, there's not foot chases and you know, crazy shit going down in the movie either. But no, I definitely liked it. Definitely thought it was really well made, super polished. I think being able to now at some point rewatch it, knowing, okay, this is less about this crime thing that we're seeing unfold, and maybe more about our relation to true crime and people's relation to true crime as pieces of fiction, which we've had movies and TV shows and and books and stuff that have delved into that topic, but this one does it in a much more subtle way, and in a way that doesn't hold your hand, isn't going to give you concrete answers. You're going to have to extrapolate some of the meaning and motivation behind the characters for yourself. As opposed to it being, you know, kind of like the thesis statement of the film of like, you know, how far is too far with us engaging in true crime? Like, it's not that kind of approach, but it's also very much, I think, dealing with those themes. I didn't read any interviews with the director afterwards, but I did get on. Man, I just cut the shit out of my finger with my ring accidentally. It's breaking apart, and I was like spinning it. Like I've got blood coming off of my finger now. Sorry, it was a random aside. I didn't look up any interviews with him specifically, but I did get on, I think it was the movies subreddit and maybe the horror or Shudder subreddit, because a lot of times they'll do official like discussion threads for the movies. And I don't place a ton of stock into other people's opinions, especially on Reddit necessarily, but a lot of times for movies like this where there's, you know, maybe a little bit more depth or nuance or, you know, interpretation going on, I'll get on there to see like people's takes. And, you know, usually it's not stuff that I walk away from being like, oh, this person cracked it, or like, oh yeah, I definitely think it's this thing. But it does give me kind of a very quick and dirty sort of real time of like, you know, here's kind of how people interacted with the movie, here are things that they were confused by. Maybe there's insights that I didn't catch that, you know, I would give the movie a little bit more depth. And again, you know, it's not professional critics, but does kind of put the finger on the pulse in some ways. And there was some stuff in there that did bring some of those things a little bit more in focus to me. One of them being, I think when you see the scene of her in the bedroom taking pictures, that moment's creepy anyway, because when the flash hits, you see she's smiling. Yeah. And you're just like, that's fucking disturbing. But the one thing I didn't necessarily even think about in the moment was her leaving the footage there. Like, I think I was so still clicked into at that point the idea of like, oh, she's a vigilante. She's, you know, trying to provide the cops with this, you know, the case with this footage that has undeniable proof that this dude is the murderer and is guilty. But it wasn't until somebody else pointed out that I thought, like, she could have just given it to the cops. Like, she didn't have to give it to the family, who would have then seen the footage, and it would have been insanely damaging to them and fucked up. So, again, the movie's not telling you these things isn't, like it would have been so much easier for other films, and I think a lot of other filmmakers would have done this, to have, the narration at the very end from the news report to be like, in an act of cruelty, the footage was first forwarded to the family, to have something to where it's leading the viewer to, have that opinion for them and reaction or whatever. Like, they don't do that. So unless you're sort of thinking about the implications of some of these actions and whatever else, you might not necessarily start to realize or think about there's a little bit more depth, and not a little bit, there's a lot more depth and nuance to this character and what she's doing and what her motivations are and everything else. I did think the very, very end was a little quick. Like, when we get the like wrap up and narrate, that felt a little rushed to where it was like, oh shit, credits. Okay, we're done. But that's not me saying like, and that's why it suffers. Like, I thought it was really well made, really well done. I think it just was one that I'll need to watch again now, sort of knowing like, okay, now that I think have a better grasp on what the themes are here, this will help me have a better, opinion and approach. And maybe I haven't watched, like I said, hadn't watched any trailers, didn't really know anything about it other than the poster, a few snippets of people's like thoughts on it. And then the concept of like snuff film, red room, dark web shit. Maybe the trailers lean into that a little bit more and pitching or selling the movie as, having that tone. But a lot of the movie for me was just kind of adjusting to what it was doing and going from there. So
I think where I settled with her was that she's a psychopath, sociopath, whatever the correct definition of that is, I don't know. Who was challenging herself to figure out how he did what he did, like where did the money go, and it was almost a case of, well, by solving the crime and getting you convicted, I'm proving that I'm better at this shit than you are. And she gets off on dressing up in the courtroom and taking selfies on the bed, and there's so many points where you're like, this isn't a good person. It's almost that she does any good that she does is almost collateral damage in the way of her being a bad person, if that makes sense. Like, whatever the reverse of collateral damage might be, collateral repair, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and she clearly doesn't care about her job. Her like, she's actively fucking her own life up at a certain point with the stuff that she's doing. And I think that is where it starts. I don't know. Maybe for me at least, that was where I started to be like, "What the fuck's going on with her?"
That was one thing actually in the film that I was just straight up like, "Okay, please do explain this, because we haven't got a clue what the fuck you're talking about now." Is when she gets the call. When she's working out in her flat, and she gets the call from her agent who says, "Oh, your 1 o'clock has been cancelled." And she says, "Okay, why?" And they say like that they got wind of the weird stuff in your personal life. We never get told what that weird stuff is in terms of like what she has already done, which could possibly have turned these people against booking her. And
I thought
that kind of
my interpretation of that was just that she was at the courtroom every day, because she at that point had been on the news.
Maybe, but
the
then
reporter had come up to her and asked her questions,
but then she doesn't give any answers that come across as weird. She's just like, I was interested in the case. Like, you can't not employ someone or fire someone on the basis of, I'm going in my free time to a court case which is well publicized and I have an interest in. That's not weird.
I guess
that's
just the idea that she's there every day and is having to get there early. But they wouldn't necessarily know that, so I know what you're saying.
I feel it could have been better communicated. Maybe if they made it clear that there was a mix-up where people felt that she was a groupie just like Clementine was.
Could be. I think, yeah. Because the mom...
Which she kind of is.
That's another subplot sort of thing, too, is like the mom of the girl and her relationship to the media. Kellyanne's relationship to the mom, and like how she's like stalking her kind of, and like...
Well, I wonder if part of the reason why she left the evidence with the mother was because there is a video clip that she looks up when she's doing her deep dive, trying to figure out how to hack into the house. which was great, by the way, where the mother says, I just want to know, like, you know, that after 8 months, like, I just want to know where she is, what's happened to her. And maybe in her own twisted mind, she's like, oh, she needs closure. I'll give her the video of her daughter being murdered so that she can get closure. Like that, there might be some kind of like ill adjustment there on top of everything else, where she's not necessarily being cruel just for the sake of cruelty. She almost feels like she's giving the mother the closure that she asked for. She just doesn't realize that closure is probably the cruelest thing that she could leave on her bedside table.
There's also a lot of like, and it's I don't want to say it's tough talking about it, but like the movie doesn't, again, with a lot of this shit, the movie doesn't give you concrete answers for some of it. So
No.
but at the very least, you know, or at least I suspected there's mental illness to some degree. Like one of the things that stuck out to me was when she was talking about reprogramming the AI that she uses, and that she's like, see, check it out. Should I kill myself? And I was like, oh, fuck. Like you've asked this question before, and like, you know that the answer changed based off of how you... So that, and this isn't me criticizing the character, throwing shade at all. Like, I've been insanely depressed. I've talked about that on the show before. Like, I've had crazy anxiety. Like, I understand that angle, absolutely. I also got the vibe at times, and again, maybe this is the like Elizabeth Salander fan in me and kind of extrapolating and contrasting the characters. If like maybe she was on the spectrum to some degree, if there was an autism thing going on, and like the way that she interacts with other people. And like social cues and stuff like that. I'm not an expert and don't know a ton about it, so I don't. Maybe that's reductive of me to think, but I got that vibe at times. Salander, I think, is on the spectrum. I don't remember if they explicitly say that in the books. I think they do, or if it's just maybe Stieg Larsson when he was alive talking about it. But I got that vibe at times too. But the movie never tells you. So again, other films which very easily would have been like, hey, this is it's a voicemail from your doctor calling about your meds, or seeing, her medicine cabinet, or a therapist, or whatever else. Like, you don't get stuff like that. So, and the movie even sets up some of those things, not specifically for a mental illness, but some of those reveals that you then don't get. So Clementine at one point asks her, like, she like point blank asks her at least once, like, what's your connection to this? Or why are you why are you showing up every day? And I think like that character of Clementine also, in retrospect, feels like maybe it's designed to throw you off of realizing that Kellyanne isn't this like sort of quiet vigilante, because when you first get Clementine and all those scenes with her, you're just like, oh, this lady's fucking crazy. Like this, it's a very sort of not Dahmer, who was the handsome one, serial killer that women were. Zac Efron played him.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Say Zac Efron.
That serial killer. Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about.
The famous serial killer Zac Efron.
Yeah. Yes. The handsome one that had all the like
Bundy.
groupies that would show up. Yeah. That would show up in court and all that. Like you get that vibe from her immediately of just like, she's, it's not calling her crazy is reductive, but just like she's not in touch with the reality of how this impacts other people and the kind of damage she's helping perpetuate as well with the families of the victims. And I thought that moment was surprising, but again, in retrospect, like, does make sense that after she sees the footage, like that whole persona for her falls apart to where suddenly it's very real. Suddenly, it's not this thing of like, oh, this guy's innocent and look how cool he is, or look how handsome or cute or whatever, like these positive things are. It's the reality of like some children were fucking tortured and killed, and this isn't a game. This isn't like a hobby. And she is disillusioned by that, and she leaves. Like, again, any other movie would have had her come back. I mean, we kind of get a glimpse of her at the end, but had some sort of twist there or whatever else, but like she's out. Like she checks out. And like you pointed out earlier, I think that's also a key scene, is seeing the difference between them watching the clips, because Clementine is horrified and fucked up by it, and Kellyanne is like, it's clear that she's seen it a bunch, whether it's been to try to figure stuff out, or whether it's been because she gets some sort of thrill out of it. I saw one thing online somewhere talk too about how like the idea of again this like connection relationship to true crime that people have to where it for her manifested to the point where it was like about proving that she could figure it out before everybody else. Yeah. So she's willing to pay what Sean was doing the Bitcoin math last night. Like Bitcoin now, it would be like over $1 million. But I think back then, and I saw someone online at some point say there's somewhere on the screen it shows an exchange rate for the time. I think it ends up being like $500,000. But a lot of money. And to get this tape, to get this clip, basically just so for her own satisfaction, either perverse of seeing it or of solving, quote unquote, solving the thing before everyone else, or both. I think likely probably both.
So there's something that I will go into, but first I wanted to go back to the Fincher thing. And then I'll make a point which is salient to what you've just said. So I'm not just interrupting you just to say something random.
No, I'm talking too much anyway.
No, you're not. First of all, so in the Screen Anarchy interview, the director was asked about the fact that he's talked about, and I believe it's Michael Haneke. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, Andy.
One of Andy's favorite filmmakers, right, Andy? I mean, if you want to have his name in German, it's Michael Haneke.
Sorry.
And I mean, I have not seen many of his movies. Dirk was the one that really hated the ones that
I mixed it up
saw back in the day when we did an
Dirk.
entire episode where Dirk only ranted about, I think was it with the White Ribbon, and maybe and Funny Games. I think he had seen those two, and then he ranted for an episode, and I hadn't even seen the movies back then. I have seen Funny Games now, and. So yeah, I have nothing against.
Okay, that was my bad. I was mixing you up with Dirk.
But yeah, so the interviewer asked, "You've talked about Haneke." Sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. I've got a terrible memory. And Fincher as reference points. But he also wanted to ask him about Videodrome. The important thing is the Fincher thing, where he says he did reference Fincher, but in a very digested way. Like even Fincher, I did not rewatch any Fincher movies. It's almost, how do we do a dark thriller? Fincher is pretty much imprinted in our brain. Like he couldn't help for it to feel like Fincher. It's just, Fincher is kind of the genre-defining director for that kind of thing. And then God, where is it now? I've got so many notes here, guys. I apologise. Here we go. So this was from another point in the interview where he said, so there are people that are hybristophiliacs who basically are attracted by blood and guts and gore and crime and whatever on a kink level. So he basically kind of posited that that might be a component of Kellyanne's makeup, that she may very well be turned on by all of this stuff, which leads into her reaction to that final third video when she's sitting there all loosey-goosey with a bottle of champagne, sans cigarette because, I don't know, maybe it would make it too obvious, and like looking very, very pleased with herself. And then she puts her AI in the blender, as all people should, because AI is evil and needs to go away forthwith.
I gotta say, on a dorky, nerdy, tech-loving level, I did like that she had this picture frame that would light up with the AI assistant.
That was cool. In fairness, of all the AIs that, and actually the timing of the movie being 2023. It feels like it's fairly prescient. I'm not 100% certain how long the large language models have been around, but it's been at least 2 years, because I was having a real hammer and tongs, actually 2.5 years, having a real hammer and tongs conversation about this with my best friend when we were driving back from a motorsports event, and we were talking about AI, and he was at the time in the camp of, it's a useful tool, it shouldn't be discounted, and it's only going to get better. And I was in the camp of, I have friends who are artists, fuck AI. And I maintain that point of view, and he's come around to that point of view since. But, the fact that she's making very salient points about the fact that I once asked my AI if I should kill myself, and it said yes. So I retrained it. is really fucking like on the nose for all of these cases that we've heard of in the last few years of people that have done themselves serious self-harm, if not killed themselves, because they talked to GPT long enough that they managed to convince it that they should kill themselves, because ultimately
or they hallucinate and the AI models and
these AI models are basically just glorified yes men. They're just there to tell you yes to what you're saying and to essentially magician's choice your way to what you were already thinking deep down. There is no intelligence behind these AI things. They're literally, I'm going to get so many angry messages now. I don't care. They're literally just magic 8 balls with a computer chip in them. Like, there's nothing about them that there's no value to them, is basically what I'm saying. But anyway, back to the film. I like the fact that she custom made her AI, so it was literally just useful for what she wanted to use it for, which up until that point did not include telling jokes. But I love the fact that they managed to get several decent dad joke level jokes in there, which I will be adding to my rotation, including the ghost one. But yeah, it's just the design of it was really cool. I agree with you. Like the picture frame, the way it lit up. I was a little bit perturbed by the fact that it didn't take up the whole picture frame. That was a bit weird. But
yeah, it's got a lot of
there's a lot of negative space there. But yeah, I dug it. I dug that.
I have no further point. She's a complicated person that we don't really understand even when the movie's finished. What you just talked about, basically, which I find an interesting thing. And after the movie, I said to Bianca, yeah, she's not only. I think there's a distinction between her being a complicated character, which is me as a viewer judging a character in a movie, and being a complicated person, which is she being complicated within the world of the movie. And she's definitely a complicated person. And after the movie, I said, well, she could have just given the footage to the cops. She didn't need to leave it, didn't have to break into the house of the parents and leave it there. There's so much going on that tells you where she definitely does have some issues. And I said to Bianca, she's not just Batman. And then I thought a bit about it. But she is Batman with a bigger focus on the psychosis.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. There was a point that was made, again, referring back to these interviews that I looked into, where he points out that Kellyanne and Clementine are actually basically on the same spectrum. And he wasn't talking about the spectrum as has commonly come to be referred to. He was talking about the fact that they're both actually kind of murderer fangirls. It's just that Kellyanne is on the exact opposite end, which is that she knows that he's guilty, she knows he's committed the crimes, and to directly quote, but they want to tap into the accused evil mind and they are fascinated by that, which I thought was an interesting thought. I hadn't considered to that moment that she might actually be a fan of his, but was almost taken over by the idea of proving he did it to show that she was a level higher than he was almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that the moment where she dresses up in the courtroom, the way that plays out, to me is like the biggest piece of evidence for that. Like, because it very much seems like, and it looks like she wants to get a reaction out of him for him to notice her, and he does. Like there is that moment where he does that like little wave. I think that's one of the moments that Andi was talking about earlier with the score. Like when his, I think it's right there, when his eyes, like, it's either when it cuts to him or when his eyes snap up to her, there's that scream.
I think it's when they make eye contact.
Yeah.
I wondered when I was at the point of watching that. So again, a Dave thought and not a research fueled thought here. I wondered if she wanted to look directly into his eyes at the moment that he sees her dressed like that, and that she felt that she could tell for sure at that point whether he was guilty or not, whether it had something to do with that.
It's also the only thing you see of him in the first two clips. Is his eyes, because he's got the mask on. The other thing that I think there's I would imagine there's definitely more to that I at first watch through kind of viewed as I don't want to again be like try to make it seem like it wasn't that important. I think it is. Again, it's just not stuff that in any other movie there would have been a character describing what these things mean, and this is a movie that shows you stuff and you have to pay attention and interpret it. But there's multiple sections of her modeling, like at her like photography shoots, and she has different outfits on and different looks, and there's something there. I don't know necessarily exactly.
There was a sequin balaclava that looked like she was almost trying to, which it wasn't her outfit. She didn't design it, but it almost felt like she was inhabiting the same skin as him.
Because the way those sequences are shot is too specific, I think, for it to be just kind of like, oh, here's some B-roll footage of her doing her job. Like, I think there's something deeper there in terms of like why she's beautiful. So there's like a clear thing of like, oh, okay, yeah, she could be a model. Like that it makes sense that this would be her profession. But there's also something I think to that and inhabiting a different look or vibe or because it makes sense on a practical level that she could, mimic this costume and show up in court, but there's also something in those sequences and the way that they're shot. You just don't necessarily know that when you're first watching the movie through without knowing kind of where it's going to go and who she is. It kind of just feels like, oh, here's some, stylized sequences of her at work. But then again, on retrospect, you're like, what the fuck was going on in those scenes? Like you can't see inside of her mind, but you can, by the end of it, have enough information I think that's another reason why I probably am like, I need to watch it again now, to kind of get a better, focus in on certain things. Cause the first time you're watching it, especially if you don't know where it's going or that the characters, her in particular, are complicated, I'm looking for like, not to solve the mystery, but I'm looking for like clues and indications of like, what's her connection to this case and when is this reveal going to happen? And you're expecting, some big twists and turns to come out of that we would see in other mysteries or crime dramas that would be narratively sort of satisfying of like, oh, she's, the neighbor's daughter who was friends with this girl, some sort of connection like that. And there's not one. It's just that she's, again, don't want to be reductive, but she's fucked up. Like there's just a lot going on with her.
Dave, would you believe? I've got a quote for that. But the director in the Fangoria interview said, I dislike profound backstories for characters. For me, the weakest part of Psycho is the ending, and then he laughs. It's way less scary when you over-exploit and come up with theories about why people do what they do. I knew I didn't want that. He also admitted, I think, if I remember correctly, to being lazy. Oh, here we go. Yeah, we didn't want to discuss much. I didn't want to discuss much backstory. They did their homework, and if they wanted to come up with a backstory as an actor's homework, that was on them. That bores me. Which I fucking love that he was just like, no, I know what I want from the character, and the rest of it, the actors can kind of bring to the party if they want, and then. Like, because the Fangoria interview is fantastic because not only is it the director, but it is also both lead actresses. So you've got Juliet Gariepi, who played Kellyanne. She said that the character is complex. She isn't just a junkie for disgusting things. She's also trying to redeem herself. Her plan was never to save the world, but she happens to give some freedom to the mother of one of the victims. And that's interesting to me. Like, that is the actress's own interpretation. I don't think that is necessarily what the director has said to her. Like, this is what you're playing here. From the sounds of how he was talking about like backstory, that it bores him, so that's the homework for the actresses. It feels like almost like the actresses brought as much to the story as the director did in a way, which I kind of like. I think. If an actor brings that with them and they've got it in their head and they're acting against that backstory that they've invented for themselves, it probably gives you a better, more rounded performance. even more so than if they had that exact same information relayed to them by the scriptwriter or the director and then had to play to that. Maybe it comes from a more natural place by doing it that way. I don't know. But yeah.
It's definitely like something that I think you have to have massive amounts of trust in. Because I think especially screenwriting like that can also be a pretty big risk because, I don't know, this is also just my very subjective take, but like there have been movies for sure where I've seen whether it's been the ending or a motivation where I don't get the sense at all that they have the answers or have a general idea and are keeping it ambiguous. Like there's times where it just feels like it seems like you just didn't finish writing this and you are trying to lean on the crutch of ambiguity to have people fill in blanks because you didn't know what to do or you couldn't commit to it. Like, whereas they're obviously, I mean, Lynch is the one I'll always go to. People where I'm like, I feel like Lynch knows everything about what's going on in his stuff, or at least has, an idea of where things are or whatever else, or how of feelings, but he's not going to tell them to you. So in a situation like this, especially with having that part be like, well, the actors were able to come up with their own stuff or whatever else, like, that's a risk for sure. And like, obviously I think the trust was there and there's enough in the text, not in the actual literal text to support, different interpretations of ways that your mind can go. But yeah, that's a tough tightrope to walk of having that, let's intentionally not explain this or whatever else. But then, I think you're risking losing people too that might need something there. And I don't think this movie does that at all. No. I think it's done well. It's just, in my case, especially not knowing anything going in, I was having to constantly adjust to be like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter. Like, there's not a connection here. This girl has just got a lot of shit going on. And so now what does this mean? What does this mean? And I had a feeling by the end of it, toward the end, that it was going to be even more ambiguous as it went on. And so I was glad that it didn't, because I think it is more satisfying to have this thing of like, okay, we've got this complete picture now, even though there are still holes in it. But a rewatch or discussion or whatever, I think will fill in some of those. And not even that they fill it in where it's like, again, to bring up Lynch, like, remember us kind of having that conversation about Lost Highway and me landing at the conclusion that a lot of people talk about where it's like, okay, a lot of the stuff represents him dying and the electric chair and all this kind of, and like, it makes sense to me for sure. But there's also part of me that's like, I also don't care a ton, like in a good way, to where it's like, it is this piece of art and it's okay if it doesn't have every answer, baked into it. You definitely get the sense, like, I think you have to have a pretty assured hand and mind and, voice in the writing. But then in this particular case, especially with the actors involved, like, to trust that they're going to be able to pull this off in a way. I'd never seen her before. I'm assuming you guys hadn't either, who played Kellyanne, but she's great. And I would not be surprised if I see her in another movie and she is wildly different in terms of her, like, it's such a understated performance, but one that, again, by the time you get to the end of the movie, you realize, like, oh, there was a lot going on in this performance, but she talks very little and her expressions are very small, and sort of subdued and everything else, even though there's a lot there. So yeah, anyway, just saying the same shit over and over again.
No, but I agree with you there. I think that she's got a very subtle way of performing, but at the same time, like, when she wants to get those big emotions across, I think she manages to do that really well. And that's not always something that you can say of every actor in the world. I certainly wouldn't be able to pull off both sides of it. I can do the big loud shit. I just can't do the really subdued, subtle stuff that well. But then I'm not an actor, and thank God I'm not, because no one would watch my shit. You mentioned the girl with the dragon tattoo. Would you believe there is a quote about that as well that I wrote down? I
at this point, yes, I would believe it.
I'm sorry that this has basically become, here's what I read this week. So Pascal Pante he mentioned, I get a lot of comparisons to the girl with the dragon tattoo, but I wanted Kellyanne to be as far from that as possible. She's way more spectral than Lisbeth Salander, and who is very punky, grounded and rooted, but the comparisons keep coming, which shows that there are so few of these characters that we cling to these few examples.
I think that's definitely
which is exactly the reason why. Because I'm not saying it's a bad comparison at all, and I don't think he is either. It's just he makes a point previous to that if you wanted to look for these kind of characters in fiction before, and I think he mentioned the Robert De Niro movie. Was it Taxi Driver? It may have been Taxi Driver that he referred to. I haven't got that bit written down, so I can't say for sure. But yeah, it was, I think. Like the almost like anti-hero style character. There are so few female characters that inhabit that particular space. And he wanted to tell a story that had that component to it. So
I think that's definitely because just recently I was talking to our friend Austin about he's read, I think now he's read all of them, but he had started reading the Stephen King, Bill Hodges trilogy, which, I don't remember the names of them now. Mercedes, Mr. Mercedes, End of Watch, Finders Keepers, I think it's the three. In somewhere in there is introduced Holly Gibney, who's also in The Outsider. She has her own book, I think a few books now, Holly, Never Flinch. And so he was kind of breaking down which of the books he liked, which ones that he didn't. He was describing, and those are more like crime dramas. And he was describing Bill Hodges as a character, Holly as a character, and like how she functions. And at one point in there, I was like, this sounds a lot like Mikhail Blomkvist and Lisbeth Salander. He was like, it's exactly that. He's like, so I think that is a big part of it too, is that there aren't a ton of, again, I'm sure there are some archetypes in the past that we could point to that are overlooked or forgotten, but Salander, hit in a big way, and the characters in those books. And so I think that has become like at least a more recent touchstone of like, oh, it's this sort of archetype and character. But to his point, I also see, especially by the time you get to the end of the movie, there are similarities, but I think wildly different characters in terms of their motivations, and they may have some of the same skill set or personality traits, but they're definitely not the same people. Yeah.
So a technical question for both of you, because I'm not sure if my stream just started glitching by the end or not. Were there screen effects going on?
I know exactly. Yes.
Okay, there were. That's good. That's good.
Did you notice that, Andi?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, because I thought the same thing. I was.
Thank God it's not my internet dying.
Yeah, the stream here a couple times, or not a couple times, but earlier in the night we were getting connected, and I thought the same thing. Specifically, I remember one shot in her apartment.
Yeah, right at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I mean, I get I think the idea of the computer kind of shutting down, like almost as though like, oh, it's been infected with a virus or something. But then it turns back on and shows you the interview with Clementine. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, so it wasn't that. So it's just something weird going on. And then the camera pans to the city out of the window, and it does the same thing. And I was like, are we in the Matrix? I'm not sure what. And I couldn't find anything in any interviews about the reason for doing that. I found stuff about how they knew they were going to do it, about how we had to make these really nice long shots and we didn't know if it was going to work because it was all going to be stuff that we had to do in post. But no explanation as to what or no question either from the interviewers, which I was a little bit bummed at, because both interviews I thought did a pretty good job of asking questions from different perspectives. And it was just like, no, we're going to ignore what you actually wanted to do with that. We're just going to ask you how you did it, I guess. And for once, I don't want the technical explanation. I want the artistic reason behind it, please. So I may have to continue searching for that after we're done. But yeah, it was just something I wanted to ask if you both had experienced that as well. And maybe if either of you have got any theories as to what you think that might have been pointing towards, I don't know.
I did not really think about that. It's not something. No, it's just not something that stuck with me that much. To be honest,
that's fair. That's fair. It's just something. I think the reason it stuck with me was because I was like, "Is this a problem at my end or that end?" And it was definitely something I wanted to ask because I knew that if it was the same for you guys, then it was intentional.
That's the movie on a disc. I didn't even stream it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed it as well, and I think I had, on a surface level reading, to me it felt like one of those little stylistic flourishes that are in the movie. Like, there's not a ton of them, but they do happen a few different times, whether it's like the long shots, or, I mean, those are very subdued, but like maybe some of the shots in like the alley are a little bit more stylized. There's definitely the part where the slow-mo of her getting dragged out, the scream with the soundtrack, which, by the way, I looked up the score, the music, and it's Dominique Plant, who is the brother of Pascal Plant, did the music.
He did mention that they didn't want it to be in the vein of normal techno thrillers. He didn't want like techno dance electronic music. So they went with a harpsichord as well.
Yeah. So I think on a surface level, I viewed the digital effect stuff as one of those kind of flourishes where there's, a little bit of style coming into what is otherwise a very grounded, kind of cold, clinical sort of approach in the cinematography and the camera and the shots and everything else. I think on a deeper metaphorical level, which I typically don't like, my head doesn't always go that far into that stuff.
It depends on the film.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, even just like my default mode isn't usually there. Sure. I think it's one of those things too, where like and this might come from my head immediately went to my religious upbringing, but like when you would have people in church, show up Sunday morning and be like, I was praying over the weekend and I felt like God was telling me this. It was always like an eye-rolly moment for me because I'm just kind of like, okay, I mean, maybe like we have no way of telling you you're wrong. Like who here is going to be like, no, God wasn't telling you that. Like there's no way to prove this, but sure, we'll go along with this interpretation that you have. I think there's sometimes for people being like, and then when the camera rotates this way, this is, supposed to impact our feelings of our own brains, rotating to the left, it's where I'm just kind of like, all right, maybe, sure. Like, so I think
that's the level to which I really have no time for it. Like that can go in the bin.
And to be clear, like, it's totally valid for people to have the engagement. No, it is. It's fine. People can engage with art however they want. It's one of those things for me where unless the cinematographer is saying this was my intent with this shot or something to where then to me it's kind of like hearing about a dream or something where I'm just like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like it doesn't necessarily, I don't put a ton of stock into it. So that all being said, because my brain doesn't necessarily go that way, I think that there is a read you could take on, whether it's impacting and infecting her own life in terms of how she views everything through these screens and like the barrier that's been set up for her in reality. Yeah, like I think there's different interpretations you could put to it there. That would feel pretty valid. But I also had a similar thing as Andi where I noticed it, but also was more just kind of like, yeah, it's a stylistic flourish, I think, more than anything is how my...
both sitting there watching the movie and Andy turned to Bianca and he was like, I bet Dave's going to ask about this on the podcast. And I've got no fucking clue what I'm going to say to him.
It was not the case, but I didn't even think that long about it.
You will now.
Yeah, I forgot
Andy.
about it
In
until
future,
you brought it up.
You will now. After this conversation, every single fucking thing that happens at the end of a movie, you're going to think, Christ, what answer am I going to have for this?
You guys ever think that Kellyanne might kill Clem? Because when she talks about the poker game and finding the emotional players and letting them bleed, or however she phrased it in French or English, at that point I thought, because Clem is the emotional one and Kellyanne is not, at that point I thought maybe she's gonna kill her. Maybe she is becoming, or is a killer, or is becoming a killer in the vein of the... What is it, Ludovic, or what his name was?
Yeah, Chevalier.
The guy on trial.
Yeah.
It didn't go that way, but I thought about it for a bit.
I think I'd be lying if I said it didn't cross my mind for a second. But then my favoured theory came into play, and then that was all I could think about, which was she's at the trial for a reason. Maybe she's a victim that got away. So going back to what I was saying earlier. So maybe she sees Clementine as an insurance policy so that she can radicalise her so much that by the time that Chevalier possibly gets off, she can just give her a knife and say, go for it. It would be a shame if he died, wouldn't it? And I was wondering if it was one of these moments where almost like she zeroes in on an emotionally vulnerable person and manipulates them to do something for her in the end. And fortunately,
Interesting that you both thought that she would have a stronger connection to the killer as being a former victim or a friend of a victim. That's something like that for some reason never crossed my mind.
Really?
It did for me only in the sense that I was trying to figure out what her connection was that she was so invested in, at least at the beginning, seemingly for altruistic reasons. Like she doesn't come out and say it necessarily, but with how she's contrasted with Clementine, the sense I got at least wasn't that she was on Chevalier's side. It was that she thought he was guilty or had some sort of ulterior motive. And so maybe it's just watching movies and like seeing stories like this in the past that bent my mind in that direction of like, you know, it would be, they're probably going to have a reason that she's connected. But then also like, yeah, it kept changing for me as the movie went on, as you got like more layers to her to a certain degree. Yeah. The other thing that throws a wrench into the stuff with Clementine and, well, specifically with her character is that like she has moments, she's not completely, seemingly at least, devoid of empathy. Like she has moments with Clementine specifically where even for me, like I don't have that personality that I talk all the goddamn time. I never shut the fuck up. So like I don't have the same personality as Kelly. I cannot remember her fucking name. What is it? Kellyanne. She does not have, I don't have the same personality as her, but there were a few different times, even in their conversations, where I was waiting for Kellyanne to snap, to be like, leave me the fuck alone. Yeah. Because Clementine's so overbearing and like says stuff at times where you're just like, what is wrong with this girl? Like is she going to do something insane? Like she's that foil to her or whatever. But not only does she not do that, but then there are key moments in the movie where she has empathy towards her, like lets her stay at her apartment, like lets her, but again, even that changes for me by the end of the movie to where it's like, okay, yeah, was that empathy truly, or was it calculated to where she wanted to share this thing with her? And because then when Clementine has that scene where she's like, I'm going home, like Kellyanne is like, it's your life. Like she doesn't really care. Yeah. So I don't necessarily know. And it could be all of the above. It could be that she is this, you know, kind of messed up, complicated person who also has flashes of empathy for whatever reason. I didn't get the sense, but I don't think it's a wrong take. It just didn't cross my mind in a similar way. Andi, you said that this other stuff didn't cross your mind, that she was a killer or going to become a killer. I by the time I got to the end of it, to me, my read on it was more of this is maybe more of a commentary, whether direct or not, of the obsession people get with stuff like this. Like, and we've talked about it in the past on the show and in real life too, but just like true crime podcasts. And I remember I haven't listened to a ton. I think I've maybe listened to one episode of, what the fuck is it called? My Favorite Murderer, I think. Just two very popular true crime podcasts. So I don't want to paint the entire podcast or the two hosts with the broad brush. I don't know. But I remember the one time I listened to it, the way that they talked about serial killers and interacted with it, I remember thinking like, this is not me. Like, this is not how I think about this stuff. I do have, I think like most people do, I would say, or a lot of people do, an interest and a sort of at times fascination with these true crime things, these acts or these people, serial killers or whatever else, from I think a similar place that most people do, which is this thing of like, why or how? I mean, we talk about the show Mindhunter, again, David Fincher on the show. We've talked about it a lot, like being fans of that show. Like that's kind of the entire premise of that show, is trying to figure out like why these people behave the way that they do. How do we help? How do we stop? How do we prevent? Like, and you know, there's this interest and fascination of like what makes someone's mind work this way. You know, all of that I get. When there's then the sort of line blurring of like, it becomes almost like fucking Pokemon or something, where it's like, well, this is my favorite serial killer, and for these reasons, because it's crazy that he did this or that. And we are then completely taking out, like, what's his name? Ryan Murphy just has done those, like, that show Monster. They just did that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was inspired by this dude, Ed Gein. They did the Ed Gein show with Evan Peters and stuff. I didn't watch it, but like it was criticized, like a lot of Ryan Murphy stuff for similar reasons, where it's like we're glamorizing, sexualizing, having this sort of layer and veneer over these real life serial killers, and like no one's thinking about the fact that real people were fucking killed and real families were completely destroyed and messed up by these acts. And there's distance is created, and this sort of lack of empathy starts to form, and to the point where it becomes, again, this like hobby. And there's to me, it's a thing where it lacks responsibility. That I think there needs to exist some level of responsibility in how we talk about this stuff, or how we look at it or address it or whatever else. And again, I'm not trying to just trash on this My Favorite Murder podcast, but that was one that I remember noticing, to where it was like, this is the vibe of this is not for me. Like, this is the way I interact with this. So for me, that was kind of like a more extreme obsessive case of that with Kellyanne. It was less I want to kill, and more of I'm so invested in this thing and I want to figure it out and I want to solve it. But then there's also elements and aspects of it for her that I don't really understand. Like dressing up in the courtroom seemed like wanting to get a reaction out of him. And I think even at first I still viewed it as a vigilante thing, where it was like, if I can get a reaction out of him here in the courtroom, it might fuck with the jurors in a way that the prosecutors were accused of at a couple points, where they asked questions or showed things that they then had to strike from the record.
Yeah.
But it's clearly a tactical move, because even though it's, struck from the record, like the jurors aren't going to forget that. Like they saw it. So there's still something at play. I think even at the first watch through, or at that moment, there was part of me that was like, is this another one of those moves for her perspective? But again, by the time I get to the end, thinking like, I don't think it was more for her. I don't really understand that. And then also her definitely taking the pictures in the room, the shot of her walking into the the parents asleep in their room and standing there. That's the stuff where you're just like, well, this doesn't track. Like this doesn't make sense for a Batman sort of move. Like, what the fuck's going on here?
That makes it more interesting in a way, though, doesn't it? Because she's clearly she's done some things that are the right things to do, but there's also a shitload of red flags that are being thrown up all over the place, and you're like, so this Hellboy is a serial killer in his spare time? I don't know, like to pull a deep cut from your past, David. Like I don't know. It's a funny one, isn't it? I feel like I need a bell to ring every time I have a quote that I need to go to, but I'm just shaking my hand in the air like an imaginary bell is at the other end. There was a point during the first of the two interviews that I read, which was from, where was it again? Screen Anarchy. That's correct. Kyle Logan doing the interviewing. Very good interview. I would recommend people check it out if they're interested to find out more about the film.
Can you link it in our
I will
show notes?
put it in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. Both. I'll put the links for both of the interviews that I've quoted from. Where the interview with Kyle Logan, he actually mentions the difference between horror and true crime, and like what are the similarities? How does Pascal Pante feel about the differences or the similarities and the comparisons between the two? And he's pretty fucking damning, to be fair. He first of all, like, he writes a love letter to horror, saying about how, there's like when you're making a horror, there's cinematography, and there's blocking, and there's acting and direction going on, and like you're trying to put together a very specific thing, whereas true crime, it's literally just, let's get in a room and point to a car crash. And and I can't find the exact quote here. I'm furiously scrolling because I didn't write it down originally, but I remembered it from reading it. He mentioned that there was a cinematographical. I don't think that's necessarily an English word, but he might be French Canadian, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt. Cinematographic. There we go. It probably is an English word, and I just aren't very good. I aren't very good at my own language. What the fuck is going on here? Just to illustrate the point, I'm butchering my mother tongue. So yeah, he said, I guess I made the same distinctions as you because a good horror film is very cinematographic. Like the filmmaker, he has to understand film language for it to be a good horror film. You need to understand atmosphere, lighting, editing, like the rhythm is so important. And then, just to skip down a bit, whereas true crime, it's a bit cheaper in a way. I think it just taps into something very innate in humans. Let's say there's a car crash, we look at the car crash. If there's a bar fight, you look at the bar fight. If you tell someone this guy's a serial killer, he killed 37 women, you'll look at him. But that's kind of easy to do. And then that links in with something else that he said, which was basically that the nature of the film and the fact that there's very little violence shown on screen. In fact, there's no violence shown on screen, if I remember correctly. There's the allusion to it, but you never see direct violence happening. He said, if you don't see it, you don't have that crutch anymore. And by that, because I've highlighted a bit and I should have gone further back, not showing the violence doesn't make the film easier on you. If anything, it makes it even harsher on you. Because I think if you watch a gory image, you close your eyes. But you can also kind of reject it or look at the artificiality of it. Like if I watched Cannibal Holocaust, bloody hell, my language today is terrible. Like if I watch Cannibal Holocaust and I see something very gruesome, sometimes I can switch my brain to, oh, it's made in this way, or that's the trick. But if you don't see it, you don't have that crutch anymore. It's much harder, I feel, to push away images that are conjured up in your own mind's eye. And then he talked about the nature of the movie, about how at times, like when Laurie Baban's character Clementine says, I want to watch the film, there's a section of the audience that kind of wants to watch it as well. And he says it confronts your own blood first. And yeah, I think this is like one of the most harrowing non-violent movies I've ever watched. Genuinely, like there's nothing on screen. You could put this on with a 2-year-old in the room and they wouldn't have a bloody clue what's going on, and it wouldn't harm them in the slightest. But you would be traumatized.
I in fact let my 9-year-old son stay in the room playing his Switch because I by the time he showed up, it was like a little over halfway through the movie, and I had also looked it up on IMDb, like the parent's guide or whatever, to make sure.
Go. Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, it's also in French. He's not going to be tempted to look at the screen.
Yeah, unless they're talking to the AI.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that she programmed her own AI, but didn't program it to speak French.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here, guys?
Yep.
But yeah, it's a really well-made movie, and there's obviously a lot more thought put into it than the amount of thought that I can spare to give it. And I could never do it justice, but I think it's really, really well done. And it's rare for a movie that I'll finish watching it and then I will immediately go to the internet to try and track down not just, these kind of YouTube videos like, the ending of obvious movie here, like I don't know, the ending of Avengers Assemble explained. Like, who needs that shit explained to them?
Right.
But there are some times where you get a movie where you do need the ending maybe not explained to you like nut and bolt, but you need to hear someone talking about what they thought it was. Like you said with Reddit, like, the first thing that happened when I typed in the film was there was a bunch of Reddit stuff, and I clicked into one of them. Somebody mentioned that the director had addressed one of the points that someone asked about, and I was like, I need to go and find these interviews. So I went off down the rabbit hole of Pascal Pante interviews. And like, it's rare that I will, and listeners to this show know very well how rare it is for me to be like, I've come with receipts today, ladies and gentlemen. Today is one of those days, and it's because I enjoyed the movie so much, but I still had so many questions that I wanted to kind of pass it by seeing what the director said about it. And sometimes that doesn't work too well. Sometimes it's better to just get together with friends and talk about it. I knew I was already doing that today, everybody. So I thought, well, I'll get the best of both worlds. And it's very, very good. I might have to track it down on disc and add it to my collection which again, fucking rare as hen's teeth that I do something like that. But
I think it's definitely one, to your point, it's definitely one of those movies that like my opinion of it, again, wasn't that it was low when I watched it. But after the movie was over, Sean and I's kind of reaction was like, okay, yeah, that was good. Like it was a lot slower than I expected. It was a lot more, it wasn't exactly what I expected overall in a lot of ways, but my appreciation and enjoyment of it has deepened a ton just over the course of this conversation. Because I think one point leads to another, observation gets your mind, kind of churning in a different direction. And then you start to remember scenes that you saw earlier. Like, as soon as your mind gets engaged and talking about it in that way, I think it brings an appreciation for it. That deepens it and everything else. And like I've said 15 times over the course of this discussion, like it's one that I'm excited to rewatch because I think it will especially deepen that when you can kind of look for the, sort of like micro expressions and, having these things in your head will definitely change how I view even the first time we see her in court and how she's, because there's constantly, even though it's very slow and methodical and deliberate in its pacing, especially at the beginning and those long takes, there's always something to look at. And even you might have sections where the camera moves away from the person that's talking. So it might be like the prosecuting attorney or the defending attorney, whoever that's doing their opening statements and they're on like a monologue, but then suddenly they're just not in the frame anymore, or they're going in and out of the frame as they move around. But then there's like a dude sketching in the background, or we're zooming in on the killer or the different people sitting around Kellyanne. Like we're constantly sort of being able to have focus on different people. And at that point, we don't know anything. Like we're getting an information dump in a lot of ways about the court case through what's being said, but it's not cutting to, there's not an editing style that's cutting to like, evidence or crime scene photos or whatever else. Like there's not much to go with it. It's just what we can see in the room with us. So you're constantly wondering, like there's a girl at the very beginning who's sitting next to her who has like a very distinct kind of like goth hipstery sort of look, like makeup and hairstyle and everything, to where she's distinct looking enough that I was just like, who the fuck's this girl? Like is she important? Like, is this, you don't know. So you're kind of trying to figure out like, what should I be paying attention to? Like what, unless the camera's giving me a very specific focus, I'm listening. And that's the other challenge too, is that if you don't speak French, like your eyes are going down to the bottom of the screen to read what's being said and then snapping back up top until the next line of dialogue shows up. So your eyes are moving around a lot anyway.
My years of anime training came in handy this day.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good. I definitely liked it. And it's talking to you guys has deepened that appreciation of it for sure. Do we have any other final thoughts? Should we wrap up double feature picks? I feel like we're at the end of this.
Yeah.
Unless you got more quotes, Dave. All right. I'm just giving you shit. I like that you had all that stuff because again, cool. it deepened the because I want to read these interviews too. Like usually that's what I have done in the past is go to director interviews, and for this one I didn't, but now I'm even more interested in reading it. Andi, kick us off. What's your double feature pick?
I had a hard time thinking of something for myself, so I did the thing where I went on IMDb and Letterboxd and looked, what other movies do you recommend me with this movie? Is there something that I have seen and that I would think is a double feature pick for this one? I'm not entirely happy with what I found. I went with Joel Schumacher's Nicolas Cage movie 8mm because it's a movie that I saw the one time back then at the cinema. Didn't really like that much back then. Maybe I should revisit it. But yeah, Nicolas Cage losing his mind, descending into the world of snuff movies. There's a bit of a connection. As I said, I'm not entirely happy with it, pairing it with Red Rooms, but I because I think Red Rooms has such a specific aesthetic and vibe to it, and I couldn't really think of something that I would pair it with. Maybe I will find something in the future that I like better. I don't know. 8mm.
I know I know exactly what you mean because I'm about to do exactly what you avoided doing, which is because I brought up Girl with the Dragon Tattoo a bunch. I'll go with the Fincher one because of the aesthetic and mood, but with it comes the caveat of like, yeah, it's also not that. I mean, there's some overlap in some of the things, the character traits or the style or the approach. Weird to say that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo Fincher movie is going to be a much more traditional narrative, satisfying kind of thing, even though it is very dark and cold and detached as well. But compared to this, we're getting answers and motivations and explanations and mysteries being solved and everything else. But I've brought it up enough times throughout the conversation that I'll throw it up with that. What about you, Dave?
Well, I could cheat even and go with Videodrome because that was mentioned in one of the interviews. But I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to go for I had a movie just pop into my head randomly, and I don't know why it popped into my head. But as it turns out, it might not be a terrible double feature. This movie stars a character who is massively amoral and essentially does what is right for them and no one else. They have their own moral code, which is very much opposed to everything that society stands for. It's also a film which is directed by David Fincher. So there's that. The Killer from 2023.
Oh, yeah, nice.
I know, it's really random, but I don't know. It just kind of popped into my head. So
no, I can see that. Like they're also both movies that give you very little. Well, I don't want to say very little. The Killer gives you a lot less, but it does have a performance and a thing that's anchored where you're kind of waiting for something to be a reveal or a twist or something, and there's not those traditional sort of answers. I also just thought of a movie randomly. I might change my pick. I haven't seen this since high school, and because I was trying to think about similar stuff where it was like, all right, snuff film or video clips or like disturbing things. Like I was in a similar kind of headspace, and I thought about the movie Caché, which I haven't seen since it came out in like 2005, 2006. And
Michael Haneke.
And it's a Haneke movie, yeah, which I didn't remember instantly. But then as I was looking up, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Caché. I remembered the cover and I remember the movie.
I haven't seen Caché, but when Dave talked about Michael Haneke, my mind went, I'm sure Caché might have been an influence on this one.
So yeah, I changed my answer to this better pick. But yeah, it's Juliette Binoche's in that, and it follows that like she's married, and they get these tapes that are left at their like front door, and it's pretty. From what I remember, I remember key scenes in the movie, but it's like pretty innocuous. Like it's creepy, but it's like footage of the outside of their house. Like they're being watched and surveilled, and it's just driving them crazy. And it's also a movie that, from what I remember, doesn't have a lot of like narratively what we would view as like narratively satisfying conclusions. There's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of like, who are these people that are involved and what's their deal and everything else. But yeah, as I was pulling it up, I was like, oh shit, it's a Haneke movie. So that's probably a better pick. So I'll go with that. Haven't seen it in 20 years. So if anybody seeks it out, you're on your own at your own risk. Cool. All right, let's wrap it up there. Listeners, let us know what you thought of Red Rooms if you did watch it. And Elio, no pressure, but if you want to send us follow-up thoughts after that discussion, feel free to do so too. We'll read them on air as always. And thank you to Elio specifically for not only recommending the film, but requesting that we do an episode on it. We're always down for that. So for Elio, for anyone else out there, if you want to hear us talk about a particular horror movie, horror adjacent movie, feel free to do so. Again, eerieinternational@gmail.com if you want to send us some longer form thoughts. But let us know if you watched it and what you thought. In the meantime, stay safe out there, keep watching horror movies, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.